Okay. So closing math, good old closing math. Hopefully you'll do that practice final this weekend so you'll have time for it to kind of sink in, soak in. And don't forget your second attempts at everything too. I'd knock those out as well. Not for any other reason than just the repetition, right? They will be, I believe they are slightly different. See some new questions, maybe a lot different. I've never done the second try ones. So do them. Do them. Don't be that person that waits until the day before, day of. They're not going to do you as much good. You need to do them, see what your scores are, and then see what topics you're weakest at so that you can really laser focus on those. So get those done for your own good. Okay. Now, closing math. I sent you an exercise. Find it. We'll go through that one. Well, we also have a finance math worksheet that I don't think I've gone over with you either. So let's do that one. So the number one concern everybody's got is prorating for taxes. And that seems to be a point of confusion quite a bit. So we'll definitely do that. But let's do this one first from the practice thing I gave you. Here we are. Lender charges a 2% origination fee. Get that picture down a little bit. 2% origination fee and 1 discount point to lower the interest rate so the buyer's payment fits into their budget. If the purchase price is $475 and the loan to value ratio is 85%, how much will it cost for both of those things combined? Oh, sorry. Gosh, I've been talking to you like a ghost this whole time. There we go. Hello. Thank you. So yeah, it's real, not just a voice. So this finance math that I gave you a couple weeks ago is what we're working on. I don't think I gave you answers back then. What are we talking about here? Anytime it's loan related math, we need the loan amount, right? So is there a way that we can get the loan amount from the given information? We have the purchase price. We have the loan to value ratio. Can't see my cursor as well as I'd like for you to, but the purchase price is $475. The loan to value ratio is 85%. That means we're borrowing 85% of the purchase price. Side note, what is the rule about if the property doesn't appraise for the full purchase price? What do we do? What can you borrow? How much can your loan amount be if the appraisal doesn't come in? The appraisal doesn't appraise for the $475 purchase price. Is that loan amount still going to be based on $475? If the appraisal comes in at $470, there you go. It's the lower of the two. So don't forget that. They might throw that at you on the test, just to test that you know that. So it might say something like on a borrower, all of this same stuff, lender charges this and that and the other. If the purchase price is $475 and the loan to value ratio is 85% and the property appraises for $470,000, how much will it cost the buyer for both origination fee and discount points? In that case, you're not going to take 85% of the purchase price. You're going to have to take 85% of the $470 appraisal amount. So look for that sort of a little nuance too. We'll just do it as it's written here today. So 475 times the 85%. There it is. The actual purchase price times the 85 gives us a loan amount of 403,750. Now that we know that loan amount, we can get down to business. What else do we know? We also know that the origination fee is 2%. So I'll put that over here. Origination fee, 2%. Discount points, 1%, or 1 discount point. And 1 discount point costs 1% of the loan amount. So you could do a couple different things. You could calculate 2% of this loan amount and write that out here. Then you could calculate 1% of this loan amount and write that out here. And and then add them together. That plus that equals this. Or you could realize that 2 plus 1 is 3. And for a problem like this, where we're just asked how much will it be for both of them combined, that's all you need is the 3% total. So 403,750 times 3% is a total amount for both origination fee and loan amount together of $12,112.50. Any question there? We okay with that? You see the difference between whatever your choice is, add the percents up and just use that, or calculate 2% in dollars and 1% in dollars and add those up. Either one works, your choice. So is that one of the answer choices? I sure hope so, because I wrote it. 12,112.50 is B. There you go. A borrower is getting a loan at 90% LTV. The sales price is $607,500. The tax assessment is $567,500. Nope, even. She will be borrowing at an interest rate of 7%. What is her monthly interest paid in dollars in the first month of ownership? Monthly interest paid in dollars in the first month of ownership. It was also 90% LTV. What in the world do we do here? We've got our $607,500 of a purchase price. Is that what we need to get 90% of, or this assessed value thing they're talking about? We don't need assessed value. That's a distraction. That's tax value. Irrelevant for this problem. We need loan amount because they're talking about interest rate. They're asking about your interest amount. If they ask about how much were the taxes, they might give you that tax rate too. And then it's just going to all come down to what the final question is in the paragraph. They might give you all kinds of numbers as a distraction. They could go on to say the tax rate is $1.03 per hundred. What is her monthly taxes? But they didn't. They gave you the tax value, but that's irrelevant for what you don't need it. So we're going to ignore it, and we're going to get the loan amount instead. $607,500 times the 90% is $546,750. So now that we have our loan amount, what do we need to do with it? This is the initial loan amount when we first get the loan, the first moment of borrowing the full money. So we're borrowing, or she's borrowing $546,750. What will she be borrowing next month? Not this. She will have paid it down a little bit, right? She will have paid it down by a few dollars at least, but it won't be this. It will be something less. But we're not talking about the second month. We're talking about the first month. I think it might be the point of confusion for people with this type of problem. The loan amount in the formula changes. depending on the month we're talking about. And so what are we going to do? We need to get the annual interest in dollars. So we're going to use the loan amount in the given month. It's not going to be like, tell me about this for month 15, or sorry, year 15, or month 312. They won't do that to you. It'll either be month 1 or 2, because in the first month, the loan amount in question is this. That's the initial amount borrowed. So that's what we're going to put in the formula, 546,750 times the interest rate of 7%. So in that moment of time called the first month, this is what's being borrowed. If they ask you for how much is the monthly interest paid in the second month, then this isn't the number we need. We need to find out what that lower amount is. It's going to be like 546, I don't know, maybe 5 something, because it's the amount that has been paid down to with the little bit of principal paid after that first month's payment. Is that tracking? Does that make sense? The number we use in that lower part of the T formula changes with each month because we're paying our loan down each month. But this particular question is talking about the first month of ownership, so we're going to use the initial amount borrowed, 546,750 times 7%. And it's a total for the whole year of $38,272.50. Why? Why is that for the whole year? Because this interest rate is called an APR, an annual percentage. Annual. Therefore, this dollar amount is annual. So if that's per year, we need to divide it by 12 in order to find out the per month, because that's what's being asked in the question. And so 3189375 is the monthly interest paid in the first month. We okay there? If you'll notice, that's also half of the question when we're asked, then how much is the loan amount after that first month's payment? We're halfway there. So let's go ahead and do it. But you need some more information to calculate that. Let's take this amount of monthly interest and figure out how much we can pay that loan amount down. And so the additional info that the problem would have to give you is what? Tell me in the chat if you know off the top of your head. What else do we need to know? Sorry for that slurp. What else do we need to know for the problem? If we know the monthly interest, we need to subtract it from the monthly principal and interest. And in order to get the monthly principal and interest, we need to know a loan factor so that we can calculate the monthly total P&I. Yeah, good. Thank you for the feedback. We either need to know a loan factor so we can calculate the PI portion, or they need to just give us the PI. And the problem might do that. They might, I doubt it, but they might, instead of giving you a loan factor, they might say the monthly payment is something. Let's say let's say it's that classic 4.78 of a loan factor. What does that mean again? The loan factor chart, chapter 15, it says for every $1,000 borrowed at in this case, 4.75 happens to be the loan factor that is used when you have a 4% interest rate for a 30-year term. It could show up in other places on the chart, but let's just say that. So for every $1,000 borrowed, your monthly payment is $4.78. Nobody's borrowing $1,000, so we've got to multiply that by how many thousands are in the loan amount. So step one, what is our loan amount? Our initial loan amount is $546,750. Divide it by 1,000. And there are 546.75 of them, $1,000 bills, right? So to speak. $546.75 times that loan factor. Sorry, guys. Let me double check here. I might be leading you astray. $2,613.47 would be the monthly PI. That doesn't make sense with my problem that I've given you here. I pulled this from AIR. Sorry, it's an unsanctioned, unverified problem, and I've just run into a brick wall here because I tried to go off the test problem. Let me come back and I'll do one of those with something that I know works out, so I can find my step that I messed up, because I don't want to take time to try to think through it. What we would do next is to subtract the interest amount here from the PI, and I should have a bit different number, a lower number. But let me go through that differently later. The answer for the question asked, number 2, is $3189.38. So there's that. It's B. B for number 2. Number 3, Stanley is financing his home, buying a home with financing, purchasing it for $213,400, making a 30% down payment. The loan factor on a 4% loan for a 30-year term is 4.78. How much will his principal and interest payment be? And that's kind of like what we were just doing, but with some different numbers. So we need to know a loan amount. We're going to use the purchase price and the down payment percentage. Oh, wait a minute. 30% down payment. That's not a loan. That's not a loan to value ratio. If his down payment is 30, how much is he borrowing? There you go. So don't forget that relationship. Down payment 30%, then the loan amount's going to be 70. He's borrowing 70% if he's putting down 30%. It'll be 30% of his own money, and therefore he's borrowing 70. So, 213.4 times 70% means he's borrowing $149,380. Loan factor on a 4% loan for a 30-year term is 4.78. How much will his principal and interest payment be? Now we need to take this loan amount that we've calculated, divide it by 1,000. It's going to be 149. Let's see, it should be that, 149.38. Let's double check it. Oops, 149,380 divided by 1,000. Yeah, 149.38. Then we multiply that times the loan factor given, 4.78. And that gives us our monthly payment of $714.04. P&I. And that was one of the answer choices. Does that make sense? Okay, number 4, using Stanley's monthly principal and interest payment and loan information from question 3, how much will his loan balance be after his first month's payment? So, do we have enough information? We know the interest rate is 4%. So that's important. We know the loan amount. We calculated it at 149,380. So using those things, we should be able to come up with the interest. So 149,380 as a loan amount times the 4% is a annual interest of 5975.20. Convert that into monthly. And that is, thank goodness, a number that works. 497.93 in interest. That's the amount of interest that is being paid in that first month's payment. But the question is, number 4, how much will his loan balance be after his first month's payment? We're going to need to do one more step. We're going to have to subtract that interest of 497.93 from the total payment, P&I, that we'd calculated previously of 714.04. That will reveal how much the principal got paid down. And the amount the principal came down with that first payment is $216.11. Because if it's PI for that monthly payment minus the I, cross the I out, what you're left with is the principal. So the principal was reduced by this much, that $216.11. What are we going to reduce it from? The original loan amount of $149,380. So let's subtract that $216.11 from it. And our loan amount left after the first month's payment is $149,164. Questions? A lot of steps. It's intimidating. I get it. Now, this is the loan amount after that first month's payment. If we are asked, okay, and we are, good. Stealing my own thunder today. Let me go on down to the next one. Let's see, 149,164, is that one of the options? Yep, I rounded up, but 149 to 163.90 C is the best closest answer. And that's the way it'll be on the test. Don't worry if you don't see the exact one. I tend to leave the number in the calculator so I don't have to clear it out. And so I'm off a little bit than if I would have rounded and then re-entered it in. But if we go on to 5, the same details from above, but take it one more step and calculate the loan balance after the second month's payment. And that's what we're going to do next. What's the difference between the last problem and this that we're being asked now? What you use for the loan amount, that's the difference. So while we used the original loan amount of $149,380 for the last time, we don't use that anymore. That's done. That's over with. That's not our loan amount anymore. We paid it down a little bit. We paid it down all the way by a couple $100 down to $149,164. So that's what we're gonna do the same thing, but with this number instead of that number. So we're gonna plug that $149,164 in for getting our interest dollars. That times the 4% interest rate. That looks like 14. I don't mean for it to look like that. Do we need to calculate the principal and interest payment again? No, because it's not going to change. The amount of monthly payment doesn't change. The loan factor portion of this problem is one and done. We just need to know how much that monthly payment of $714 is, and that's the same payment forever. So we don't have to do that math again, this part, where we use the loan factor. But for this first step, we need to use the new loan amount that we were left with after making the first month's payment, $149,164, times that 4% interest rate. The annual interest based on that new loan amount would be $59,66.56. I think that's the point of confusion for people. You're like, annual interest paid for the whole year? You mean, but it's only 1 month of having that loan balance. It's just for the purpose of the calculation. This doesn't mean that the annual interest you're paid for the whole year is this. It changes with every amount the loan balance comes down. It's only to calculate how much how much interest is paid in a month based on that loan amount. So if that's your confusion point, if it just doesn't make sense, sometimes it doesn't have to, just do the step. Just think, okay, here's what I do next. Don't worry about the why so much. Just go for the how and the what comes next. So the new loan amount times that interest rate gives us the monthly dollars in interest, all for the one sole reason of coming up with how much interest gets paid in that second month, right? So $59.66 divided by 12 is 497, running out of room, 21. That's how much interest is being paid with the second month's payment. Your second month's payment is going to pay interest to the lender of $497.21. And therefore, we need to subtract that from the amount our monthly payment always is that we learned from the loan factor calculation. That's going to reveal how much our principal balance came down, which was $216.83. Let's compare how much our principal came down to the last month, or the very first month compared to the very second month. Oh, look, it came down $216.83 this second month. Last month, it came down $216.11. We're not making a ton of progress. They stack the deck. The lender stacks the deck and makes you pay a lot more toward interest to them in this first half of that loan term. We're not done. Now we need to subtract the $216.83 from the loan amount, the new loan amount we used for the second month calculation, the $149,164. And so our new loan balance, and after the second month's payment, is $148,947.17. Questions there? A lot of steps. Let's identify those steps. In this kind of problem, step one would be, I'd say you could do whatever, but I'd say let's get the loan amount. Calculate the loan amount because it's a loan related problem. Get the loan amount by, let's do it this way. Using the sale price times the loan to value ratio. We're going to need that loan amount somehow. Step two would be the using that loan amount, and let's go ahead and calculate the monthly payment of P and I. So let's use the loan factor in order to get the P and I payment. Step 3 would be, let's use the loan amount times the interest rate to get the amount of dollars in interest. Looks like hieroglyphics. And now step 4 is going to be subtracting that interest from the principal and interest to find out how much the principal got lowered. And then finally, step 5, this is why it's intimidating. There's 5 freaking steps, right? The loan amount minus that principal to get the new loan amount after the whichever month you're dealing with, first or second month. I don't think they'll ask for third, fourth, fifth. It's not a finance course. They're just trying to, in fact, in real life, you're not really going to do this. You're going to say, hey, let's talk to the trusted lender that I've connected you with. Find out from them. And most people aren't even asking what this thing is. How much is my loan balance after it's one of those things that's like, will we ever use this? Probably not. But you need to do it now. So those are the steps. And then do it all over again if they ask the loan balance after the second month. We're just going to go back to, in that case, we're just going to go back to step 3 and do all those same last steps, but using the new loan balance that you just got from the first month in order to get the one for the second month. Let's keep going unless you have something else along those lines. Speaking of math, let's do math from the practice exam. That might be a good use of time. No, you don't have to calculate amortization. I mean, you kind of are by using the loan factor. That's kind of what that is. But as far as an amortization chart for a 30-year loan, 360 payments, what percent? No way. That'd be way more than is on the skill list or necessary to learn list for this class. Okay, so on that practice final, if you don't want to know, if you haven't done it yet and you don't want to know, then just listen, just watch anyway. On January 1st, the seller paid $23.45 in taxes for the current year. If she sold the property on June 23rd, that same year, how much would she be credited at closing? Okay. Taxes. What's important when it comes to property taxes? Number one, I'm always looking at is, when did it close in the year? What's the date that I'm really thinking about? Where in the year related to what date matters for this type of calculation? September 1st, you got it. So is this before September 1st or after? June comes before, right? September 1st is not halfway through the year, right? It's like 2/3 or 3/4 through the year. It's lopsided. That's why that's why it has to be 3 possibilities, because if we close before September 1st, we're closing potentially within the first half, but maybe a little bit into the second half of the year. So what are we going to do? How much would she be credited? Oh, well, they're giving us a little bit of info. We don't have to figure out what's going to happen for that seller. All right, let's do the math and see what we think. Seller paid $23.45 in taxes for the current year. Here's another thing that we're running into. Some of you might have already caught it. Wait a minute, Neil. What kind of teacher are you? You told us that if we close before September 1st, the way we handle taxes is we're going to have to debit the seller. She shouldn't be getting a credit. And how in the world did she pay the taxes already if it's before September 1st? I don't know what color the sky is in the world of this question. I don't know why they're doing it this way. So I'm sorry, but you probably at least on the PSI won't run into this. But since you know, part of your brain is screaming at you because you're like, this is impossible. This is not how we do it. Okay. But if we did do it this way, if the sky were purple, then the seller has paid. We use the facts from the question. That's it. Even if they don't make any sense, if they don't fit the real procedure that we do here, what we do know from this question, given the information, is the seller has paid them already. As impossible as that is. Maybe this is more like a national question, although it's in the state section. I'm not trying to make excuses anymore. They've paid the taxes for the whole year. We're just going to have to do the calculation. So if they've paid the taxes for the whole year, what do we have to do? What's our procedure? Here's our year, January 1, December 31. Taxes, we're talking about June 23rd, which is pretty darn close to the middle. 23rd. They have been paid. That whole year's taxes have been paid. So we need to give some money back to the seller. That's why they're saying, how much would she be credited? How much money? We're going to be giving her this much money back. However much that is. That's what we have to calculate. The money being given back, credited, it's going to be credited to the seller. It's also going to be debited to the buyer, by the way. But that's not part of the question that they're asking. But we just need to get that buyer's portion. That's what this is. This is the buyer's portion. How much they're responsible for, because it's how much money they will be having to pay in taxes for the amount of the year they're the new owner. Of the year of closing. Next year, this is irrelevant. Next year, they're going to pay the whole year's taxes, obviously. We're just talking about on day of closing, how do we make it fair? And since the sellers paid the whole year, we need to give them back some money. And if the taxes... Oh, let's see here. Got it. So do we need to know a tax, what are the annual taxes for the whole year in this problem? Do we need to know an assessed value or a purchase price or a percent of the purchase? We don't have to know any of that. We know everything we need to know because we know that the seller paid the whole year's taxes, which were $23.45. Those are the annual taxes because that's what they paid, because it says they paid all the taxes. Oops. Let me share that with you. There, $23.45 annual taxes. That's the total tax bill. Now what? Step one is what? What would you do for step one? Yeah, let's turn that annual tax amount into... Actually, we need more than that, don't we? We don't just need to know the monthly taxes. We need to, when it comes to taxes, we need to go all the way down to the daily amount because we're going to multiply it by the number of days. Yeah, that's uncommon. And I wouldn't be surprised if one of the answer choices were if you mistakenly used the monthly number instead of the daily number. So let's get the daily taxes by multiplying that $23.45 by 360. We're just going to use 360 unless they tell you on the problem. They'll tell you which one to use. But we'll just keep it simple here. I'm going to go on faith and hope that they're going to keep it that way instead of using like a real actual year. So you have to figure out days of months. $6.51 per day. Step 1. Step 2, we need to calculate the number of days. So see, guys, some of you may be like, why is he saying hashtag? This is not a trending topic. Back in the day, we had phones that had this thing on it, and it was just called the pound sign. It's also the symbol for the word number. So that's just what I use as an old guy for shorthand. The number of days, what? To the seller or to the buyer? Are we looking for the buyer's number of days or the seller's number of days? It doesn't matter. Always calculate the seller's days. Don't try to take a shortcutting. Even though what we need is the buyer's side of things, let's get the seller's days, because that's the best way I know to make sure you don't forget to incorporate the day of closing on the right side. I want to make sure the seller is paying for that day of closing. And if you try to calculate the buyer's portion without getting the seller's days, I'd say there's a 80 to 90% chance you're going to, at some point, forget. Number of days to seller is what? If we are on June 23rd, then that's 23 days in June, plus 5 months before that times 30 days each, or 150 days. So that's 173 days total to the seller. Let's go ahead and calculate the dollars to the seller, and then we'll just subtract that from the total. So step 3, days to seller, I'll call it seller's days, times the dollars per day. So 173 days times the $6.51 per day. To get $1126.90. You might have something different if you cleared out and put in a rounded amount. And then step 4, now that we know the total amount of dollars that the seller does have to pay, let's subtract that from the total tax bill to get the buyer's portion. Which is $1218.10. $1218.10. And so that is going to be a seller credit. Again, because they, and according to this problem, which is dumb, have already paid for the whole year, even though we know that's impossible. Okay. Use what this question gives you, regardless of yeah, buts. If you find your brain going to the phrase, yes, but what about? You're out reading something into the question that'll probably throw you off. How are we doing there? And that is one of, oops, nope. Wait, where'd that, oh yeah, it is. That is one of the answer choices. Oh, that's why. Oh, okay. Sorry. A little momentary brain hiccup. 1218.10. Looks like he did the same thing I did as far as rounding. He didn't round. He just kept it in the calculator. Oh, last step was to subtract the seller's dollars from the total tax bill. I'll show it. So we know the annual tax amount is $23.45. We need to subtract from that how much the seller is responsible for the whole year. $1126.90 would go here because that's what the seller has to pay, and then the answer of $1218.10. Put that over here. Is the buyer's portion, right? You're welcome. Okay, next one. Going backwards, that was number 38 on the state portion practice exam. Lender agrees to lend 80% of appraised value of a townhouse. At 6.5% for 30 years, the home appraised for 125. Borrower is charged 2 discount points. What is the cost to the buyer? All right, here's one of those things they're throwing at you where you have to know, what are we going to use to calculate the discount points? Which number are we going to use? Are we going to use the loan amount, or are we going to use are we going to use okay, they didn't give us a price. Okay. So he could have thrown something in there. He could have said the purchase price is 130, but it only appraised for 125. But that's more than they give you. They're just saying lender agrees to lend 80% of the appraised value. What is the appraised value? 125. So those are two things we need in order to get the loan amount. The loan to value ratio multiplied by the amount it's appraised for. Probably because it appraised for less than the asking price or the sale price. So anyway, do we need the 6.5% over 30 years? Is that going to help us here in calculating discount points? Nope. Distraction. Just extra info, irrelevant. None of that helps us. We're just being asked how many dollars are 2 discount points costing. So when you see that, you could go straight to the last part of the question and say, what do they want from me? What is the cost in discount points to the buyer? Oh, okay. I need to convert 2 discount points into dollars. And so discount points is a lender-related thing. Therefore, we need a loan amount. And the loan amount is 80% of the 125. The appraised value is 125. So step 1, get the loan amount. We're borrowing $100,000. That's nice and easy. Loan amount is $100,000. Step 2 is pretty much it. Calculate there's really no reason to make it more complicated. Calculated the dollars of cost in discount points. And so if we have a loan amount of $100,000, we're just going to multiply that by the discount point percentage. And if it's 2 discount points, how much of a percent of the loan amount are those costing? 2 discount points cost how much percent? What percent of the loan amount? What percent? You got me, gave me the final answer, which is great. But this step, we need to know 2% of the loan amount. So therefore, yeah, there you go. $2,000. That's the dollars that those discount points are going to cost. Are we okay with that? What could they have done to distract you? They could have given you a sale price, which would have been irrelevant because we need the lower of the two, appraisal versus contract price. And since they're talking about the lender lending 80% of appraised value, it makes me think in this real world example, it must have come in lower on the appraisal. Otherwise, the lender would be lending 80% of the sales price on the contract, right? So watch out for that sort of thing. What's the amount of interest on a $68,000 mortgage at 11.6% rate for 9 months? Oh my gosh, we didn't do that before. We're going to have to take our knowledge and apply it and do something else. But you have everything you need to know in order to calculate this. Let's just reason it out. No. For your purposes in this class, the question in the chat was, will there ever be a time when the percent is different than the number for discount points? A discount point always costs 1% of the loan amount. What could change, or what else you could do with that discount point problem, is they could ask you, okay, if the discount points cost, let's just take that and run with it. If the discount points cost $2,000 for two of them, you're buying 2 points. How much will your rate be lowered by? Let's take that one and say, take it to that level. How much will this lower the rate? Because in real life, that's what that buyer wants to know. If I do pay those discount points, what does that mean for my payment? Do you have what you need to know? If they did that to you, we know the current rate, 6.5%. So 6.5 is the same as 6.5. Current rate is 6.5%. How much does one discount point lower the rate by? The rate comes down, you buy it down. What is that fraction? One discount point that you pay for lowers it, thank you, by 1/8 of a point. So if you're thinking 1/8, what am I serving pizza here? I don't want to do fractions. Then just figure out the decimal of that 1/8 by plugging it in the calculator. This is just a big old division symbol, right? It's like saying 1 divided by 8. So do it. 1 divided by 8 means same thing is 0.125 of a decimal. So how many discount points did we buy down? We bought down 2. So 2 discount points is going to lower the rate by 2/8. Oh boy. Same thing though. All we need to do is say, what's 2 divided by 8 in the calculator? Oh, now it's a decimal that you recognize. That's a 1/4. Doesn't matter. All you need to know is the decimal version, 0.25. So the rate's getting lowered because we're paying 2 discount points. We're getting lowered by 0.25 of a percent. So let's subtract that 0.25 from the rate. The standard rate given. We're buying down this rate. It's going to end up being 6.25. So that borrower gets to enjoy a loan payment over their 30-year, 20-year term, whatever it is, of 6.25 instead of 6.5 because they paid a chunk of money. They paid $2,000 at closing. Good. What is the amount of interest on a $68,000 loan? Let me reset over here. At 11.6% rate for 9 months. Okay. Amount of interest in dollars is what they're asking. If it's a $68,000 mortgage, that's the loan amount that we need. And if we have a loan amount and an interest rate, we can calculate the monthly interest. And that's what they want. They want to know some portion of an interest. So good. Let's get our monthly interest and start with that. Our loan amount of $68,000 times a rate of 11.6% means how many dollars per year? And then we use that to divide down into how many dollars per month. 68,000 times 11.6. It's 7888 per year. How do we get that down into months? Divided by 12. You knew that. So months 657.33 per month. If that's the amount per month, I guess step 1 was calculating the annual interest, right? Step 2 is where we are now. Well, step 2 was getting the monthly interest. Now, step 3, finding out the amount of interest that they're asking for. 9 months of interest. So we're just going to take that 9 months and multiply it by how much interest per month. 657.33 times 9 months should be 59.16. That's how much interest you're paying for 9 months worth. We just took what we already knew how to do and applied it to this weird problem that nobody would ever ask you ever in the whole world, but you need to know how to do it. So here you are. Amount of interest on a $68,000 loan at 11.6% for 9 months, 59.16. Questions, confusion? Good. We just needed our monthly and then multiply. What if it said for 11 months? Then we multiply the monthly by 11. I'm looking for math right now. We'll come back and do whatever other ones you might want to do. I think would that be the only math? Might be something on the national. Oh, there's some. Excise tax on a property selling for $175,000 with $25,000 down and the buyer assuming an existing mortgage of $149,500. Are they giving you some distractions? You don't need that assumption stuff. Do you need the down payment in order to get the loan amount? Well, you could get the loan amount with the down payment by subtracting it from that sales price. But to calculate excise tax, what do you need? How do we calculate excise tax? With loan amount or with sale price? Excise tax is a sales tax. We need the sales price, right? Just because it has the word tax, don't get confused, especially if you were to see it after having done a proration tax question where you did need the tax, the loan amount, or you needed the tax value. Sorry. You don't need tax value or loan amount. What we need is the sale price of $175. And so, we're just going to divide that price by $500 because the formula is $1 per $500 of sale price. So this 175 divided by 500. So our excise tax is $350. We okay with that? The only thing that could complicate this is if the sale price were odd. 175, 231. What if that's the sale price? Same thing, divide by 500, but you're going to have to round. The answer is 350.46, but they don't want your change. They want you to round up. So in that case, the excise tax would be the next higher whole dollar amount. That's it. That's all they can do with excise tax. What other math could we do? How about conversion? You bet. Absolutely. Good question. Even if it comes out to 350, yeah, $350.01, you round up to the next dollar. You bet. Welcome to government. um Using sale price versus using appraised value. That's only going to be a thing. Somebody said, is there an easier way or tips to remember when to use sale price compared to appraised value? Um, so the only thing about that is when it comes to the loan related stuff, because the lender loans the LTV on the lower of the two. So either whether the sale price is lower or the appraised value is lower. So it's going to be a loan related question that this would be a thing in. And think about that. The lender is going to loan you 90% of something. But what if the appraised value is 150,000, but the purchase price was 157,000 that everybody agreed on? What is happening here? The buyer and seller agreed on a contract of 157,000, but the appraiser can't justify that amount because not enough houses nearby that are similar have sold to give them enough comps to comp it out at that. The subject property just can't be supported for a purchase price of 157. Does that mean the seller won't get 157? No. They might insist. Well, what if the buyer can't? The buyer in this case, the purchase price or the sale price on the contract was 157. The appraised value, I don't want to use that. Let's see, appraised value came in at 150. So what's that going to mean? We have a discrepancy here. Here's the next step in real life that could happen. Either, step one, the seller comes down to the appraised value. So the seller says, okay, my bad. I'll just come down and honor 150. I'll give up those $7,000 because it didn't appraise. In a market like this, probably not going to happen. The seller's going to be like, well, you can go ahead and walk, buyer, because you just gave me due diligence money that is non-refundable, and I'll keep it, and you walk away. Even though it didn't appraise for full price and you can't buy it at the 157, because why? Because the lender's only going to loan you that 90% on the smaller of the two. And so if the lender's loaning 90% of 150, the buyer's going to have to come up with the difference. Come up with the difference of what? What is that? 150 times 90% is $135,000 loan amount. And what is that? A $15,000 down payment? Is that right? Well, in this case, the buyer's borrowing $135,000. They're going to have to put down $15,000. They were planning on borrowing based off of that purchase price, which would have meant borrowing $141,300. Which would have meant them having to come up with a down payment of $15,700. That's only $700 more than what they're going to have to come up with. So they're able to put less of a down payment. The problem is the seller's insisting on a purchase price of $7,000 more. Can this buyer come up with that additional difference? Their down payment can't be $15,000 now, because the seller won't come down on their sale price. Their down payment's going to have to be $22,000. Because if the seller's refusing to come down on their price, the buyer's going to have to come up and put the extra money in as a down payment. They're going to be borrowing this 135 and having to put a much bigger down payment than even they would have put down if the appraisal had come in on value. Then it would have only been an additional $700 because their down payment would have been $15,700. So the three different possibilities when it doesn't appraise are: seller comes down. Good luck in this market. Buyer adds to their down payment, like I just showed you. Puts more down. How much more? The amount of difference between what it appraised for and the sale price, because the seller won't come down. Or number three, well, there's four. Meet in the middle. Maybe the two parties are like, let's just get it done. And the seller's like, I'm not going to be super generous. I'm not coming down 7, but I will come down, let's just say, to 154. So we'll make that the purchase price. Can you add $4,000 to what your down payment is? So the buyer puts $4,000 more down instead of $7,000 more because the seller's willing to lower their price by 3. So they've met in the middle. They've compromised. Or the seller says, get out of here. I'll keep your due diligence money. Dead deal. You can go. You can go now. You are excused. I'll collect the due diligence money from another buyer. And the buyer, depending on their situation, might just have to take a break from trying to buy. Because maybe that due diligence money that they just lost by the seller not being willing to come down and the buyer having to walk away over it, maybe that was $9,000. They don't have another $9,000 to put into another offer, try to buy again. Pretty sad, especially if it's an FHA VA buyer. Just reality. So that's what this is about, how it applies in real life, and why that the original question was, how do I keep straight? I thought maybe knowing the why could help you remember it. I don't think there's any other place where you're going to need to know which to use. But it's in terms of getting the loan amount. If they give you an appraised value that's lower than the sale price, you're going to need to use that lower amount to get that loan amount. So any problem needing loan amount, which is going to be basing any problem that's asking for lender fees, origination fee, discount points, anytime you need to know the dollars per interest or dollars per annual interest. Hopefully that helps. Let's go back to some old school math. Yeah, tax questions are based on not appraised value. There it is. Maybe that'll help. Assessed value. Assessed value. So let's look at those terms. Maybe get that straight. Terms. Sale price. We know what sale price is. Loan amount. Assessed value. So loan amount's going to have to do with lender fees. Sale price is going to have to do with excise tax. And to get the loan amount, you're going to need the sale price a lot of times. Assessed value. Assessed by who? The tax people. So it's just another word for tax value. But, in this class, when two different terms start with the same letter, my brain short circuits. And I'm like, wait, that was my memory aid, was the first letter. So appraised value is not the same thing as assessed value. That means an appraiser went out there and did their thing. Came from the appraisal. Let me do it that way. Appraisal. We need 2 P's, I think. So assessed value is what? The value assessed by the taxing authority as to what they're going to charge you every year for your tax bill, right? So yes, tax questions are going to be based on this, assessed value or tax value. Oh, yeah, sure thing. We'll talk about joint tenancy and tenants in common. Does that help? The assessed versus appraised. Okay. Let's look at some good old square footage to acreage conversion. So we're in math world. Let's say it's 300 feet of road frontage. Okay, we'll do it that way. And 160 feet of depth. So here's the road. The amount across the front of the road that you see from the road is 300 feet, and it goes back 160 feet. Can we calculate the square footage of this lot, of this dirt, with this information? Step one, get the square feet by multiplying the two together. And so it's 48,000 square feet. We okay there? Step two, convert that to acres. By dividing it by what? Here's our formula: square footage over number of acres multiplied by the little old ladies. I had somebody Facebook message me the other day, and he was from 4 years ago, a student, and he said, every time I think of acreage now, I think of those 4 little old ladies, and I literally LOL, and I think of you. I'll take that. So that's the 43,560 feet per acre. And so, yep, thank you. In the chat, just saw it. We're going to plug in what we know. 48,000 is how many square feet this lot is. So that needs to be divided by the 43,560 to come up with the 1.10. That's how many acres it is. This is one of those where if you just know that T formula, I mean, all of them are like that, but I think this one helps more even. Then it doesn't matter what they give you and ask you for. You know where things go. The square footage on top, the rate, that's a rate, by the way, just like all the other T formulas. It's 43,560 per. Anytime the word per is used, it's a rate, right? Dollars per 100 on tax amount, tax problems. So we have a rate on the bottom and we have a bigger thing on the other side of the bottom. What if they asked next, they said, property sells for $23,000 per acre. So at $23,000 per acre, how much is this property worth? Or what should this lot sell for? Then it's going to be a step 3. We're going to do all those same things, but we're going to take that 1.1 acre and we're going to multiply it by that $23,000. And it's going to be pretty close to the dollars per acre. It's going to be a little bit more of 25,344. We just multiplied how many acres by the dollars per acre. That's what we could expect it to sell for-ish, close to. What if instead of that, they said at $4,100 per front foot? How much should it sell for? I'd like to test you on that, knowing square footage versus front footage. So do we care that lot is 48,000 square feet? If this is what they're asking? No, irrelevant. All we need to know is which dimension. just the front one, street side. If they were to give you if they were to give you that lot size like this, 300 by 160, the street side should always be the first number. If it's some weird shaped lot that you won't see in this test, 300 by, they go clockwise, by the way. In like, if this is the crazy shape of lot, they're going to go the street side one and then the left side and then continue on around till you're back. So in real life, if you were to see dimensions of acres by 300 by 80 by 130 by 20, then that means 300, 80, 130. That doesn't work. The shape would need to be different. It'd probably be more like that. Point is, it's always going to be the first number is the front footage. So what else? What about this one? Let me think. How does it go? A special assessment problem. Special assessment. See if I can remember how these go. Is put on the property owner. Their lot is 130 by 97. And so a special assessment is put on everybody in that stretch of road for maybe streetlights. They're all getting streetlights, so therefore they have to pay a special assessment of certain amount. Let me think. The special assessment is at, let's say, $200 per foot of street side road frontage, right? Front footage, front feet. $200 per foot. I guess I'll do it that way, front feet. How much will the property owner have to pay? If the special assessment for the streetlights is $200 per front foot for every property owner along that stretch of road, and her lot dimensions are 130 by 97, how much will she have to pay? There's a little nuance to it, but you go ahead and tell me what I think you're going to tell me, and then I'll show you, and you'll be like, oh, yeah, all right. And you'll be like, that's why he told us this, so that they can't trick us on the test. Special assessment is what? Government levied special assessment is applicable to everybody who's benefiting, right? So yeah, you're getting there. Would you do 4,100 times the 3? Well, 4,100. What's the 4,100? Oh, I gotcha. Unrelated. Let's keep this as a standalone problem. Sorry, I should have been more clear. Forget that last problem completely. Just use this information for this problem. Thank you for asking. So 130 feet times 200. I get that. I understand why you would ask that. But let's look at it. Here's our street. We'll go vertical. Here's our lady, her property. It's 130 feet across the street frontage and then 97 back from the street. And so, yeah, her street frontage is 130 and the special assessment is 200 for $26,000. Boy, that's a lot. But does she have to pay for that whole chunk? Or does she get to split it with a co-owner? Not a co-owner, but somebody that owns whatever this land is on the other side of the street. Thank goodness she gets to share it. Right? Because you know what it is? It'll probably be more of a street paved thing. It'll be the special assessment is for repaving the street because that benefits both sides of the road. So that little nuance probably makes a difference. So she's not having to pay 26,000, she's having to pay half of it. 13,000. Because somebody owns the land on the other side of the street and they get to split share in the cost. Because they both benefit from the repaving of the street. Look out for that type of thing. And I mean, that's the kind of thing that gets me all day long. Those little simple things. Divide by 2. Oh yeah. Oh man. Okay. Yeah. So don't forget to divide by 2 if they talk about a street paving situation. It might help to draw out the diagram so you can see it. Whatever that amount is per front feet, divide by 2 because they're both sharing it. It doesn't matter if this owner, this is something I thought about when I first saw this problem. It doesn't matter whether that owner owns 130 feet of frontage or more. They are responsible for the same chunk as she is, plus however much more they might own. Or even if they own less, because it maybe not just one owner over there, but it's 2. Somebody over there is paying for half of it. Might be multiple people who own, but her portion is going to be divided by 2 because somebody else is covering that other chunk across the street. Maybe more than one person, but as far as this lady, for the subject of this question is concerned, she don't have to pay the entire thing. Yeah. Exactly. They'll tell you if she owns anything, but the point of this question is that you divide by 2, so it would be a different owner. What else? Excise tax, we did that. Acreage conversion. We can do closing math, some more closing math. Let's do, everybody's favorite, interim interest. Let's make up an interim interest problem. Sale price is $312,000. Loan to value ratio is 80%. Interim interest. Oh yeah. Closing, sorry. On July 23rd. How much will the lender charge in interim interest? Do we have everything we need? We can get our loan amount. Oh, no, we don't. We need to know an interest rate. How much will the lender charge in interim interest if the rate is 7.25%? We have a rate, we have a loan amount, we have a closing date. That's all the information we need to calculate interim interest. The key with interim interest is, does it matter? Do we need the per month or per day of interest paid? Per month or per day? Yeah, we're getting down to the days. Do we need to know it for the whole year? Are we going to be dealing with the whole year's calendar? No. it's going to be the month of closing. So July, here's the Y. Here's the July, August, September, June, July, August, September. Because here is our closing day in July. We just need to figure out how much that buyer is going to be paying at closing day for the rest of the days of the month of closing. Because the rest of the year will take care of itself. They're not going to have to make a payment on August 1st. They don't have to, because they're going to live there in August and then make their payment on September 1st for the privilege of having lived there already in August. Paying in arrears is what you get to do when you own. So we just need to know the rest of the days in the month of closing. And then this also includes the exception of who pays for the day of closing, and that is, in this case, the buyer. Every other calculation, like any tax proration question, the seller pays for the day of closing. But the buyer's got to pay it now because the seller's out of the picture. They have nothing to do with it. They don't care about the buyer's new loan. Interim interest is about the buyer's new loan. So, step one, let's get the interest per day. Oh, well, I guess step one is let's get a loan amount. Sale price times the loan to value ratio. 312 times 80%. It's 249.6. Step two is we have our loan amount. We need to get our dollars per day. Interest per day. And we'll do that by taking our loan amount, multiplying it by our interest rate of 7.25. Our loan amount we just figured was 249.6 times that interest rate of 7.25, $18,096 per year. Turn that into per day. So $50.27 per day. Now that we know our interest per day, we need to calculate the number of days. That the buyer, that the buyer is responsible for. How many days will they be the owner of the month of closing? And we know that there's 30 days in the month. We subtract out the day of closing. That's 7, but we're not done because we need to add one more day when we're dealing with interim interest for that day of closing. So that buyer needs to pay 8 days worth. Step 4, $50.27 per day times 8 days. $402.13. It will be a debit to the buyer. This is not a proration. We're not taking from the seller or giving to the seller anything because it has nothing to do with the seller. It's the buyer's new loan we're talking about. We're just talking about what does the lender from the new buyer's new loan want the buyer to pay for the privilege of living in that house for that fraction of the month of closing. We okay with interim interest? The trouble spot is don't forget that day of closing. Factor that in. Add that in. Interim interest. What if it's this one? Let's do a tax one. What if it's annual taxes are $5,300 per year. We're closing on October 28th. And the seller has not paid the taxes yet. Do we have everything we need? We have a tax amount per year. They might make you calculate that. They might say the tax value is this and the tax rate is that, and you might have to do that. I doubt it, but because in this point, this kind of problem, they're just trying to test you on the tax proration, but you could do it if you had to. You would have to do it on the monster question, quite likely. But if it's just one little tax proration question like this, it'll probably be pretty straightforward. Now, step one, I like to go ahead and just get the dollars per day in taxes because that's unaffected by buyer versus seller. It's just what it is. $5,300 for the year divided by 360. So $14.72 per day. Step two, what do you think I'm going to say? Whose number of days? Number of days to seller. Always to seller. And so October's the 10th month, the 28th day of the 10th month, plus 9 months before that at 30 days each is 270. So 298 days to seller. Time. Well, I guess, keep our steps. Stay true to the steps. Step 3 is 298 days times $14.72 per day. The dollars the seller is responsible for, $43.8722. What's our situation? Here's our year. Here's our October closing. Here's our September, important September 1st date. October's after September. Seller has not paid the taxes at all. They need to be paid. What's our procedure for when a seller has not paid the taxes and we close after September 1st? Where's the money going? How's it going to be split, if any? Debit, credit, debit. What are we talking about here? Seller's being debited $43.87 because that's this portion, right? Because it's the most days. But are we done? Is it a seller debit that and are we crediting the buyer? Ooh, somebody said buyer debit also. Wait a minute. So this is not a proration. We're not taking from one given to the other. When we're closing after September 1st and the taxes have not been paid, then it's going to be a seller debit for their portion and a buyer debit for their portion. So we're almost there. We know the seller's debit to being debited for $43.8722. Step 4, I'd say, would be determine who pays what. And so we know we're debiting the seller and we're debiting the buyer their individual pieces. So now we need to do one more step and take that total tax bill of $5,300 for the year, subtract the seller's part of it, to find the buyer's portion, which is 912.78 or so. If you clear it out and rounded, yours would be a little different, but it won't get you the wrong answer. So it's going to be a seller debit of $43.87.22 and a buyer debit of $912.78. We okay with that? All because the seller has not paid the taxes yet, and we're closing after September 1st. So what's going to happen is the attorney's got to take each of the pieces from each one. They'll add them together, the attorney will, and they'll send off the payment to the government. And now we're good for the whole year, the rest of the year. Next year, the buyer's paying the whole thing as of September 1st when they can start paying it. But for this year, this day, this closing moment, if they haven't been paid, but they could have been paid, we're not going to give that buyer $4,387. Can you imagine what some buyers would do? Maybe most. I mean, when you bought a house, you kind of feel broke. You're like, oh man, great. I have a new house. Now I got to put blinds up and I need to buy furniture. I can't use grandma's couch in here. This is a new house. And you think of all the things to buy. Buying a house is just a trigger to buy a million other things. And so it'd be real tempting for that buyer to say, well, it's October. Surely if I go ahead and spend this $4,300 on a nice matching living room suit or a new refrigerator, I'll make it back up and be able to pay my tax. Nope, let's just eliminate the temptation. This is the logic I'm thinking this probably is. Let's go ahead and pay it since it can be paid. Why don't we do this way before September 1st? Because there's no option to pay it. They won't take your money because the bill's not out yet. Question will ask us either what the seller or the buyer's debited. Yeah, the question is asking, they might word it like, how will this be handled in the closing statement? Right. And you'll need to know, taken from one, given to the other, or taken from both their pieces. And then that just leaves, well, let's do it this way. Let's say all the same info except seller has paid. They have paid for the whole year. All the same stuff, so you don't have to calculate individual pieces anymore. How are we going to handle this on the closing statement if the seller has paid the taxes for the whole year? They're out. They're out of pocket. We need to give them some money back, don't we? So it's going to be some sort of a seller credit, crediting them for the buyer's portion. Yep. Seller credit 912.78. We okay with that? What if it's a rental property? It's an investment property and the rent is $3,100 a month. And we're closing on June 17th. How will this show up on the closing statement to make it fair to everybody? We're just worried about our month of closing. We don't need to worry about the whole year. Here's our 17th. What do we know about rent compared to a house payment? When do you pay your rent? Before you live there or after you've been there? Before. So we know that seller collected $3,100 for the whole month already. They've got it. It's like taxes have already been paid for the whole year. It's that kind of thing. So they've collected the 31, and if the seller has the entire 31 in their pocket, but they're only owning it for 17 days out of the 30 days, we're going to need to take some money from them and give it to the buyer, because the buyer's going to be the owner for the second part of the month. So step one, do we need to know the rent per day or the rent per month? Yeah, we already know the rent per month. That's a lame trick question. Rent per day, dollars per day. 3,100 divided by what? How do we get that rent per day? Divided by 360? No, dummy. Divided by just 30, dummy being me, as if I were the one who's asking. 3,100 divided by 30 is 103.33 per day. Step two, number of days. Number of days for who? The buyer. We need to know how much the buyer is entitled to receive, because this is the only example where we're not talking about money having to be paid out. We're talking about the money that the buyer is going to get because the money got paid in rent. All the other things are expenses. Rent is money coming into the property owner. So what's the buyer's portion of days? This number? Well, 30 in the month minus the day of closing. It's what, 13? $13 days. Do we need to add a day? No. We only would add a day in the interim interest problem, because what we want is the buyer's days starting the day after closing. Guess what? The seller has to pay for the day of closing in tax questions, but they have the privilege of getting that rent for the day of closing in a rent question. They're the last owner as of the day of closing, so they get 17 full days of rent. So then step three is to put them together. $103.33 per day times the 13 days. It's going to be $1343.29, showing up on the statement as a debit the seller, credit the buyer. Congratulations, buyer. Here's your first rent payment for this new investment property, a portion of the first month's rent. Next month, in fact, a few days later, on this first of the month of the next following month, they're going to collect a full month's rent, and forever after, while they're the owner renting it out. So that's what rent looks like. It's one of those that's dealing per month. Rent deals in a month thing, not a year thing. And so does HOA dues. So let's look at one of those. HOA dues are $5,700 a year. We're closing on March 23rd. Sellers all paid up through the month. They've paid for the whole month of March. So we don't have to adjust for anything through the rest of the year. They are paid through January, February, March for the first quarter, probably is what's going on here. Here's our month of closing in March. Here's our 23rd. Sellers paid for the whole thing. They're going to want some money back, aren't they? We need to give them the buyer's days. worth of money. That's how much they have overpaid. So step one, dollars per day. $5,700 divided by, because 50, pay attention to this one though. Don't let them get you, because this is the kind of mistake I like to make. It's 50. I mean, obviously, 5,700 per month would be crazy, but anything happens when you're in the heat of the moment on a test and you're doing math. They might give you the dues per month or per year. So just adjust accordingly. Since they're giving them per year, then we need to find out the days by using the days in a year. Which is 1583. 1583 per day. Step 2, number of days to buyer. So 30 days in the whole month minus 23, 7 days. Those are the buyer days, starting with the day after closing. So we don't need to add another day or anything. Again, adding another day is the only time we do that is for an interim interest problem. 7 days. And then step 3, put them together. $15.83 per day times 7 days is $110.83. What are we going to do with it? We're going to credit the seller because they've paid it for the whole year, and we're going to debit the buyer for that amount. So it'll just be added to what the buyer has to bring to the table. The buyer's already having to pay the sale price. They're having to pay all kind of loan fees, blah, blah, blah. This will just be one interim interest. They're paying that. And then this will be one of them, HOA. It could be that the seller has not paid for the month. What does that look like? Same stuff, but the seller has not paid for the month. We're still dealing with the month. We still get our dollars per day. Now, we're worried more with the 23 days that the seller was the owner. So we're going to take our new step 2 is going to be that we calculate the number of days to seller, which is not hard because it's the day of closing, right? Literally, because we're only dealing with the month instead of the whole year. Big difference, much easier. Oh, good. I'm so glad. Buyer debit, seller credit, just clicked on that problem. You know, the light bulb moment is always amazing. Revel in it. Enjoy it. Days to the seller is 23 days because that's the day we're closing. So they have to pay the HOA dues for those 23 days. Step 3, 1583 times 23. $364.09. What are we going to do with it? The seller is going to have to pay it because they haven't paid any. And we need to go ahead and probably the same thing as taxes when they haven't been paid. We're going to go ahead and debit the seller their portion and debit the buyer their portion. Right? How do you get the buyer's amount if you didn't do one already? Then in this case, we know that the seller's portion is $364.09. We know that the monthly, we didn't calculate it yet. We'd have to calculate step 4 and get the monthly HOA by getting $5,700 per year divided by 12. It's $475. Now that's how much they are per month. Subtract out what the seller's responsible for the month that we just calculated. So there's our 110 and some change. A little different because I rounded differently. Are we okay? That's HOA. We did a rent. We did interim interest. We did tax proration. Oh, what about escrow? We need to set up the escrow account. So taxes per year. Are $7,300. The insurance premium, when you hear that word, you think that's how much it costs per year. Insurance premium is $1,300. The lender's instructions to the attorney, $4 months of taxes. And 7 months of insurance. I don't know why. That's just their instructions. Don't ask the lender. Don't ask the golden rule. They who make the gold have the gold make the rules. To set up the escrow account. So how would this be handled on the closing statement? Boy, that's some messy writing. But you can see the numbers: $7,300 per year for taxes, $1,300 per year for insurance. Need to collect 4 months for taxes, 7 months for insurance. How do we calculate this? Step 1. What are we going to reduce these amounts to? Dollars per day or dollars per month? This annual tax and annual insurance need to be monthly, right? So determine them per month. 7,300 divided by 12 and 1,300 divided by 12. So $608.33 and 1,300 would be 108.33. Weird coincidence. So now that we know the amount per month, step 2, the number of months they're asking for times the dollars per month. So then it's taxes were 4 months. Times 608.33. And the insurance was 7 months times 108.33. So I'm just leaving the thing in the calculator because I'm lazy. That's the insurance one, and then 608 times 4. 2433.32. And it wants to know how much to set up for the entire escrow. I'm going to add them both together. It's going to take $3191.65. And the question is, how is it handled on the closing statement? That's so I can be a jerk and not tell you, is it seller expense, buyer expense? Is it credits, debits? What are we talking about here? How will this be handled on the closing statement? Who pays for it? Setting up the escrow account for the buyer's new loan. So the buyer gets to pay for it. Yeah. So it is a debit to the buyer's side because the lender requires it, therefore the buyer pays. I'm thinking of other times, other things to know for like the monster question. What about deed preparation? Who pays that? Buyer or seller? Well, whose expense is that? Deed prep, preparing the deed. Preparing the deed of the house that's being sold. So yeah, that's a seller expense. Let me do it this way. Seller debit. Because it's like, well, again, selling your car. You wash your car, you fix it up, shine it up. You're preparing it for the sale. So the attorney is making the new deed, writing it up based on what the contract terms say so that it can be signed over to the buyer. Signed by who? Only the seller, right? Seller's the one who signs the deed, the new deed over. So the seller pays for the preparing of it. Excise tax. Who pays for that? Excise tax. It's a sales tax. You got it. It's another seller debit. Purchase price or sales price. Who pays for that? Yeah, the buyer. They're buying it. Loan amount. Where's that showing up? The new loan amount. How's that showing up on the closing disclosure? Credit, debit to who? Loan amount. Yeah. It's a buyer credit because the lender's giving it to them. And then over time, over 30 years, they'll be paying it back. But as of the day of closing, it is a buyer credit. Loan payoff. Just the word loan payoff. Paying off what? Paying off the existing loan of the seller. If you see loan payoff, the seller's existing loan has to get paid off. So that's going to be a seller debit. Come on. It's messing me up. Had this nice, pretty little list going. Now it's going to not let me write on it. Okay. All right, there we go. Seller debit. Just to keep the line straight. Because the seller's paying off their existing loan. Property tax. Who pays or gets money for that? My favorite answer in real estate. It depends. Depends on the closing. Depends on if the tax has been paid or not. We need to know more information. Interim interest. Who pays for that? Yeah, it's a buyer debit. Rent. How are we going to handle rent? Rent has already been collected because the first of the month is when it gets collected. So it needs to be a debit the seller, credit the buyer. I guess I could do it in the right, same consistent order. Seller debit, Buyer credit. HOA, if the seller has paid it already. Yes, if you're selling a rental property and rent will have already been paid because it gets collected on the first of the month. So yeah, that was what I was talking about. HOA with the seller already paying, then again we need to give them some money. It's going to be a seller credit and a buyer debit for the buyer's days. Escrow. Setting up the escrows. How are we going to handle that? Who's paying for setting up the escrows? Buyer debit. Most of these line items are buyer debits, right? Oh, commission. The most important one. Real estate commissions. Who's paying the commission so far? Before all those lawsuits change the industry. In which case, who knows? But as of now, seller debit. Origination fee. Who's paying that? Making a little more room here. Origination fee is a buyer expense because it's a lender requirement. They're charging it. What about discount points? Same thing. Buyer debit. What about recording the deed? Who pays to record the deed? Who cares about it? While the deed prep had to be paid by the seller, the buyer needs to pay for it to be on the record. What about the deed of trust? Recording the deed of trust. Again, the buyer cares about it. It's their deed of trust. So it's buyer debit. What about an overnight fee? Or some sort of a FedEx fee or something of the payoff? I'm getting into some real world stuff here. Got to send that seller's final payoff out. So that's going to be a seller debit so that their payoff gets to their lender. So their old loan is paid off. That's about it. A lot of things. What other math questions or other questions you have? Somebody said something up here. Wow, that's a good stretch. What's the ultimate question? The big math question we'll ask. So you can skip it and come back to it at the end. They'll either ask you, they might ask you both, but it could be either how much is the total the buyer needs to bring, or how much will the seller be getting? Or they might give you one set of facts on this closing and ask you both. But I think it's probably going to be either or. Oh, good. Let me show a couple more things here. Coming close to time, and I've got a thing coming up, but I got a little bit more time. But there's a math stuff on the other practice exam. Let's run through that. License, law, commission rule questions. So don't forget, you've got the comment section for license, law, and commission rules, but that is pretty good for most of the stuff. You should refer over to those individual documents as well, but it's everything except 10 things are addressed in the comment section. Where are those 10 things? Syllabus, section 21, letter C. See what that looks like. It literally tells you in the syllabus these aren't in the comment section. So if we go down to license, law, commission rules, here we go. Here we are, section 21. That's letter A, section A. Keep going down to C. There it is. This section is not discussed in the license, law, commission rules comment section, but must be covered. Thankfully, they're the simplest things that you learned like day one, because I cover enough of the license, law, commission rule on day one that has pretty much all of this stuff. It is the fact that you will be a provisional broker at first, and then you have to take 3 30-hour classes to get rid of that, become a non-provisional. That's this one, termination of your provisional status. What happens if you don't do those 3 30-hour classes? Well, then you can't be active. If you've already activated and you forgot to do your post, you will become inactive, and you have to do some stuff to get reactivated. If you never activated, you still had those 18 months ticking down. And this is going to take you more stuff to get activated, right? You're going to have to do whatever you didn't do of those. It might be that some people do 2 of them, but then they just forget the 3rd one or don't get around to it because they got so busy. Whatever it is, you have to do what it takes to make up for it before you can get activated. And then credit for post-license courses is only good for 2 years from date of completion. In other words, if you did that post class more than 2 years ago, you're going to have to redo it. Why would that matter? It would matter if you never affiliated with the firm. And so you weren't selling anyway. So you didn't really even notice. You did 2 of them because you were all excited about it, and you never affiliated yet. And so 3 years goes by, or 2 years and a day, and you're like, okay, I just need to do 1 more. I'm ready to go ahead and get into this business. Nope. You took too long. Those 2 you did almost 2 years ago, you're going to have to redo them. That's how that could come back and bite somebody. The post classes are good for 2 years only. Petition for predetermination is a thing that you would do if you're worried about your criminal past and whether or not you even want to put in the time and effort of this class. You could go ahead and pay the real estate commission $45 to look at your specific case. They're not looking at your character study or your background search at all otherwise, all the way until they get word that you've passed the PSI. Even if you ordered your background search, it's going to come to you when it's finished in an email. It's going to go to them in an email too, but they don't care about it yet. They're not going to spend their time on it until they see that you passed the PSI, at which point they'll look at it and do a character study and ask you questions if need be. But if you're worried that you had that one crazy high-speed chase that time and you got arrested at whatever it was, you could ask them now, hey, here's $45. Should I even bother to go through that horrible pre-licensing class with that terrible teacher? And they'll tell you. They'll go ahead and make a decision determination. License expiration. When do licenses expire? What date every year does your license expire? 2 words to think about: expiration versus education or inactivity. Is your license expired or is it inactive? Inactive is about education. Expired is about the money. So June 30th, like all your other bills, you can pay that bill all the way up to the day before it's due. Not the same for education. Your education is due 3 weeks before the day that it has to be complete. So it has to be done by June 10th, because on July 1st, you will go inactive if you haven't done it by June 10th, the education. The money is different. The money is June 30th. What happens if you don't pay the money? What's the name of your license? It's called expired. What if you do pay the money? Then it's a current license. So expired, the opposite of expired is current. The opposite of inactive is active. Inactivity, active versus inactive, is about the education. Continuing ed, how many CE classes every year do you have to take? How many CE classes are due by June 10th? 2 4-hour classes. You got it. One of them, what are they? What are the 2 classes? One of them is a what? What am I teaching these days? Yep, one is an elective, one is an update. I'm teaching that update from time to time. License reinstatement. How do you get your license reinstated if you don't take the classes by June 10th? Then can you take your makeup classes between June 11th and June 30th? Can you take your CE and make it up in time for July 1st? No, you cannot. That's why it's due June 10th. They want those 3 weeks, the commission, to kind of get their breath, sort through, cycle through everybody's, because guess what? Most agents wait till the last minute. Vast majority of update classes are taught between March and June than between, July and March, the months previous. And the reinstatement would be you're taking a class in July because you waited till after June 10th, and you got to take your CE when it's next available, which would be in July, but now you have makeup work to do. You'd be taking, if you missed both your update and elective this year, you would be taking the update for this year is done, vaporized, no more ever to be taken again after this year. So you would have to take 8 hours of electives to make up for what you missed this year, plus next year's requirement too. They go ahead and make you take that too to get reactivated. So 8 hours of electives for this year's miss, and then your normal 4-hour of elective and 4-hour update for the current year that you're making everything up in. Good question. The question was, if you don't do the classes, the CE, or pay your money, they don't require you to go through the school all over again. Wrong. They will require you to go back through pre-licensing if you don't pay the money over the course of 2 years in a row. If you miss 1 year, you can make that up. If you miss 2 years in a row, you're going to have to take pre-licensing over. You will never have to retake pre-licensing just by missing CE. You could miss 10 years of CE and you won't have to go back through pre-licensing. You'll have a whole lot of electives to do, but you won't have to go through pre-licensing. You'd have a lot of elective hours plus the current year that you're trying to get reinstated of CE to do. And probably some post. I think in that situation, they throw in some post. Best course of action in that case is just ask the commission what they require, because odds are in 2, 3, 4, 10, 5, 10 years, they might change stuff and make different requirements. The broker in charge has to supervise provisional brokers very closely. I just got the chills all of a sudden. It's cold down here and it hit me. So I might start chattering. Broker BIC supervises provisionals hand in hand, tuned in to the transactions that provisional is involved with. Very close. And even for non-provisionals, the BIC is in charge of making sure their license they need to remind them to do their CE and pay their license. They're not going to pay it for them or hold their hand or swipe the credit card for their non-provisional, but they are going to say, hey, by the way, don't forget June 10th, June 30th. And then more importantly, the advertising. They're still in charge of responsible for making sure that advertising done by any broker in the firm is done properly. Blind ads, not allowed, meaning you didn't admit that you're a broker and put your broker name, firm name in the ad. And if you're a provisional broker, you have to include the firm's main phone number. It can be yours as well, but you got to have the firm phone number. If you're non-provisional, you don't have to have the firm phone number. It can be just yours. And then, trust account. The BIC is responsible for the trust account. And they also, as of this past year, the BIC is held responsible for any unlicensed assistants in the firm. So they might have some big-time hotshot agent who has a team and a couple of unlicensed assistants, but the BIC of the firm is still responsible for making sure that those unlicensed assistants are doing stuff right or not doing what they're not allowed to do. We talked about the payment. Proof of licensure, you have to keep proof of licensure. In other words, either a screenshot of your license so that you can show it on your phone if you had to while you're doing real estate daily out and about, or the copy, actual printed copy of your license card. If your name or address changes, or phone number or email, any change of your contact info, how many days do you have to report that to the commission? There you go. 10 days if you change any of that stuff. How many days do you have to report that you were arrested for a crime? I was mean to you just now. Gave you a little trick question there. If you get arrested, you don't need to tell them. But if that arrest turns into a conviction, 60 days. 60 days to tell them of a conviction of a crime. But arrest, accusation, don't let them fool you with that on the test. It's only a conviction. You got to tell them within 60 days. That's everything in that one section that's not covered in the comments section. Everything else is the rest of the syllabus. And we'll go over this on Wednesday. The part of the License Law Commission, like trust accounts, when to deposit them. We talked a little bit about it already. And then timeshares. For the most part, you can remember what you need about timeshares with the numbers 5, 5, 5, 10, 5. What is a timeshare? It is having access to it at least 5 times over the course of at least minimum of 5 periods or years. If the test question says so and so has pays to stay in this property or own this property for 5 times over the next 3 years, then you're going to think that's not a timeshare. It would have to be at least 5 years, right? At least 5. And then 5, 5, 5. The other 5 is 5 days when you buy a timeshare to back out of it if you don't like it. I bet a lot of people do it. Buyer's remorse. And then 10 days that the developer has to keep the earnest money, keep the deposit. 10 days to keep the earnest money. And then the last 5 is $500 fine to the developer if they violate the Timeshare Act. Oh, how many questions? Yeah, I never remember. I'm sorry. And I don't want to tell you wrong. But I just can't remember. But it's not like gargantuan. You'll get it done in the night, We know you'll log in on Thursday like normal at 5:30. Jason will be with us for the first bit, and he'll give you the scoop. Here's how this is going to work. Turn off your stuff. He's the heavy hand. He's the bad cop. Not really. But he tells you the rules about the test. Like, you can't have anybody in the room with you, by the way. No kids running through. Nobody can come in the room at all. So you're going to have to maybe make special arrangements and nail the door shut or something, some of you, because that's not allowed. And no books or materials, only the scratch paper, and you got to hold up the paper and show both sides, and he'll walk you through that process and give you an email probably this week telling you the process. Read that entire email. When you get that from him, it'll spell out exactly the procedure. I'll continue to be with you, and I'll have you on screen, but it'll be muted. Nobody says anything out loud after that little first Jason telling you the rules. Then he says, okay, you ready? Okay, go. Then everybody mutes. I turn it to a different format so that you can't see each other. You just see, I'll turn my screen off, but I'll have to have you up so I can watch for suspicious behavior. I'm the proctor. And if you have questions like, what's the answer to 13? I'll tell you for $500. I'm just kidding. No, you just have to let me know that you need to go to the bathroom, that kind of thing. I just tell me, hey, gonna take my break. I think it's like one break. He'll tell you, he'll go through that process with you. What else? I think that's it. We'll do other review, whatever review you feel like we didn't get to today. Let me bring it on Wednesday. We'll start with license, law, commission, rules stuff. We'll hit that first. And then we'll go down through the biggest ticket items and then whatever else you guys have. So definitely do your final state and federal, state and national, if you haven't already, and do every version. Do your second tries of everything. At least the first try has to be done to qualify to take the test on Thursday. But for your own study efforts, for your own good, just power through them and get them all done. You may as well. By the way, some people get a little freaked out, understandably, at the last minute. And they panic and they think, oh, maybe I'll just not show up. It's so easy to not show up. You don't have to dial in. And they think, well, maybe I just won't take the test on Thursday. And if you don't take the test on Thursday, can you take it on the following Wednesday? Yes, but you would have cheated yourself out of one more at bat, one more. And I think the value in taking the test is huge. I would rather take the test with just knowing 100% in my mind I was going to fail it if I felt that way, because of the value of the practice time, at least getting to experience it one more time. And then if you were to skip it on Thursday for whatever reason and have to take it on the makeup on next Wednesday, then if you don't pass it on the next Wednesday, you won't have any other backup option. That's it. One and done. If you were to try it on Thursday and fail one or both parts, you get to try it again the following Wednesday the 10th. But if you skip Thursday and just take it for the first time Wednesday the 10th, there is no second try, right? If you don't pass, you're going back through a class in order to try again. So if you fail the class exam between a 60 and a 74, because passing is 75, if you get a 60 to 74, then you can just retake the test without going back through the class. So on Thursday, if that's what happens, you get to retake on Wednesday the 10th. And if you pass then, or whichever section you have to retake, by the way, you don't have to take them both. If you pass one but fail the other, you're done on the one. Pass the national, fail the state, all you're retaking on Wednesday the 10th is the state portion. If you end up not passing Wednesday the 10th, then yes, you have to go back through the class again in order to retake the test. And if you go back through our class again, it's a reduced rate. I think it's like $250 or something. Don't quote me. Maybe more, but definitely not the same as the $400 or $500 that you paid the first time through. Yeah, I think so. Question was, do we get feedback on the questions like we do on It is Class Marker is how we give you the test. It's just that it's Class Marker with me staring at you. Not really. I'm kind of watching to see if there's any weird movement, but I'm doing other stuff too with my little command center here, but I've got to keep an eye on you as a proctor. But it will be given to you via Class Marker. So you've done it before, and it'll be that night. Jason will give you the speech, and then he'll hit a button on his end, which will open up Class Marker. You will have already pulled yours up, and it'll appear, and there it is, and you can just click and start. So again, if you haven't, the time, right? Don't forget your time missed. Be careful. Hopefully, let me get rid of this so I'm not showing stuff I'm not supposed to of other people's things. There we go. Let's go to here. I don't have it up in front of me. Oh, there it is. Let's see. Got a couple people have missed 800 to 900 minutes, but everybody else is lower. So as long as you don't miss more than 1,020 minutes, then you can take the final on Thursday. Let me see. Let me check that. You're good. I just responded directly to that person who asked. Anybody else want to know their time? I'll send it to you individually without telling everybody. So you're in good shape, the one who's asked so far. Let me see. Yeah, I don't think anybody who's tuned in today has anything to worry about, especially if you show up Wednesday. Yeah, you guys who are here, you're all good. All right, what else? Was this helpful? Slow math is good math. It's reps, man. I mean, if you could take time off this week in prep to do that, especially the day of on Thursday, that'd be great. I know sometimes you just can't, but the repetitions, when I started teaching this 6 years ago, I think you're welcome. I'd been selling forever. And so that doesn't mean you know the rules super solid. I was kind of rusty. And so I was cramming. Over the several months there, I read almost the entire yellow book because the pressure of teaching it is a whole different ball game. And I didn't want to teach it without being able to think of where this thing showed up and stuff. And I'd get up at 3 in order to teach somebody a fill-in class at 9 and cram for that particular section. And it was tough. And I feel like I was kind of where you are now, especially the math, because I had been rusty. And you don't have to do much more than check math when you're actually in the business. But after that first year, after doing it and teaching it and doing the reps and seeing the practice exams, it just got, okay, yeah, this is that thing. Here's what we do next. And so I just will tell you that to say, the more practice you do, the better it's going to get. It's not like it's just always going to get harder and harder. It's really, in fact, if it doesn't go perfectly for you and you do have to redo, don't lose hope, especially if this is not your first or second retry. I've heard of and seen people, I've tutored people that tried in other places and they came to me and they had tried 5, 6, 7 times. But just think about the upside, right? Once you get in it, one commission makes up for all of those retake fees that you had to pay. I mean, good grief, there's that. And most businesses you start take quite a bit of investment in both time and money and study and degrees. And this is a degree-free career that could outmake your doctor's income, frankly, who spent 12, 16 years. Not to paint too rosy of a picture, because that's going to take a lot of work and it's going to take time. This is a long game career, but it is worth it. So don't lose and give up just because it didn't go perfectly the first or second or third try. Keep going. Keep trying. It's worth it. It will be worth it. Yeah. Well, the final for the class is made by the same person. Basically, Jason came up with these questions, and so okay. I see. Yeah, it can. The wording can certainly be intimidating. Good for you. Took the whole week off. That's a great privilege if you can do that. Good for you. So yeah, let me know. By the way, I'm around. I'm flexible. And so if you have some last minute or between now and then panic attack or question about a thing, I'm still around. So text me, email me, Notion, any of that stuff. Let me know stuff to help you clarify sticking points for your own particular study process between now and then too. I'm not off limits. I'm available and willing. Well, I hope you can take a little break today and maybe do a little bit more and cram it in there. I wish, because I'm the guy that has to carry all 45 bags of groceries in at the same time. I can't make those 2 trips. I got to do it in one. So I like to go to the weight room for 4 hours and be extra sore rather than go for 30 minutes a day all week. It doesn't work that way. Our brains don't either. We work much better little pieces, little chunks at a time. So if you've ever heard of the Pomodoro technique, it's that principle of don't just hammer it out for 3 straight hours. 25 minutes, for whatever reason they did research. Study for 25 minutes, get up, don't study, give yourself a 5-minute break, and then go back to it. In other words, small bites, right? Don't just torture yourself. I'm the torturer. I'm the procrastinator, cram all night, be miserable, and collapse the next day in the middle of the test. So little pieces and break it up, right? So you're also maybe change your location or even turn around in the chair, something so that you can have a bookmark in your brain like, oh yeah, I studied license law when I was sitting on the couch. And then I studied contracts when I was at the kitchen table. And it might help you in that moment to remember that one little nuance. And last thing, test taking tip, skip questions that are giving you more trouble. If you just get frustrated, rather than pull your hair out, skip it. Because it might be that 3 questions later, some piece of that question is a reminder of what you needed to remember the one you skipped. Really, I see that a lot. I see reminders. Oh, yeah, okay. Sometimes your brain is just cloudy, and then there's a moment of clarity that, and because of that I just remembered, now I can go back and get the right answer on this other thing. And then I can't give you advice on this because half the time it works and half the time it doesn't. But when I go back and change an answer, it's usually wrong. But I've seen plenty and graded plenty of tests back when I had to grade them in paper, because I used to have to do that. I used to grade these things by like an old school teacher with a red pen on paper. And I could see where they had erased the bubble sheet. And I knew that they had had the answer, but they changed it. And just as many people who changed to the right answer as changed to the wrong answer and had it right to begin with. So I can't give you advice on that. I'll just say be careful. Be careful and don't change too easily. But if you're worried about something, yeah, give it a second look. Yep, you'll know your score immediately. I'll be monitoring that. So when you finish, the question was, since you're taking it in class marker, you'll know the score. I'll see it. It'll be an email that arrives to me, and then I'll check that and see what your score was. I'll private message you on Zoom and say, oh, congratulations, you did it. Jason will be in touch with the next steps. Or you got the national, but you didn't get the state. You missed it. And you'll see the score, and I'll see the score, and you'll say, depending on what the score was, I'll let you know, okay, come back for the retake. If we skip it and get to the end, will it remind us we skipped certain ones before we submit? I think it does. When you when you take your second try on some of those other class marker ones, experiment, look for that and try it just to be sure, because it'll be handled in the same way. But I do think it says, are you sure you're done? So it'll at least give you that. There you go. Somebody said there's a section that says unanswered. Okay, good. All right, guys, have a great weekend. Do your practice exams. Appreciate you. And let me know what I can do to help between now and then. Otherwise, I'll see you on Wednesday. Oh, this is all recorded. It's on the YouTube channel.